Just waiting for Reverend Bishop Aaron Long to arrive with some technical difficulties moment ago. There he is. Okay. Are you waiting for him to connect to audio? Are you there, Aaron? You may have to unmute yourself.
All right, let's try it now. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
All right, Donald, I got to say, I absolutely love what you got behind you.
Can I do something here?
You do whatever you want to do. In my case, my picture coming up.
No picture.
All right, let's see how we do this. Okay, yes, I'm okay with me. Can you see me now?
Yeah, you're in the parish there.
Well, it's because I've got 3 computers and none of them will access my Facebook account.
Okay.
So I'm having to do it with my phone, and I figured we've got 2 different Wi-Fi routers in here. I figured I wouldn't lose it one way or another in the sanctuary.
I got you. So you like my tapestry?
I absolutely love that, because that's part of what I've been actually tossing around. I just got off the phone with Matt Byers today. We are actually talking about starting a Society of the Black Cross, because we need men that are more militant. I was talking about this the other day at one of the meetings with the laity, that they were asking me why it is I wore choir dress or black robe. I said while I wear the clerics, I said it's because a good military man, when he goes out to fight, wears his BDUs. I don't care about all these prissy boys in their dress uniforms and all their prancing around. I want to see men that are going to be in the trenches and going over the hill.
You know, this morning I was prepping in a meeting for Reverend Roger DeBerry, and I was talking to Bishop Joseph Rossello last night, and I was thinking of a battalion. And you've got those that do logistics, get me my food and water.
Yep.
We got the guys who are in the medical unit taking care of the sick, and
Right.
some have specialties at that, such as Dr. Christian Hernandez. Then there's the headquarters that runs all the admin stuff. And then there is the intelligence unit that is scoping out where the enemy is. And then there's 4 or 5 companies that coordinate the combat arrangements. And then you've got the top structure with the colonel, lieutenant colonel, majors, and so forth. It's talking to some of my friends, wiser men than me. They thought that my Marine-like terms don't work so well in Britain, and they thought it might be better if I kind of softened that. So I agreed to that. You know, instead of calling a sodomite a fudge packer, I'll just call them whatever. And that's a Marinism. I'm full of them because I was around them. But as for your point of militancy and being on the front line, we need those kind of men too.
Well, I'm going to tell you, Donald, I'm of the opinion we need more master sergeants and less 4-star generals.
Well, a 4-star general knows that the master sergeants, first sergeants, sergeant majors, and the gunnies run the Marine Corps. Now, the generals tell them where to go, but trust me, the gunnies or the Navy chiefs run the Navy. And good leaders know that. We need laity in the trenches. So what were the laity telling you?
Well, basically, what the laity and me have been talking about, and I've been working with my elders real strong, putting together what I've put together. Because what we have discovered And this has been a 20-year journey for me.
Can I interrupt for a minute, Paul?
Oh, interrupt all you want, Donald.
Paul, I'll call you Paul after Paul's Chapel. Sorry, Aaron. For those who don't know Aaron Long, he is now a bishop, well, senior presbyter. And we are going to be talking, I think, about corruption among leaders, which I don't want to drift off too far from the Fenwick fiasco either, because this is going to go to Fenwick watchers.
Well, Fenwick is an example of what the problem is.
Pardon?
Fenwick is an example of what the problem is.
Yes.
The corruption is not just in the Anglican world, though. The corruption is across the board.
So we are talking about a huge, widespread problem, but we're keeping Fenwick, Hunt, and Stephen in view as a modern day example of it very vividly. And this is going to be video number 45, Aaron, and all of that since August 13. And some say, oh, man, I'm like a junkyard dog with a bone. And my psychiatrist, because I got PTSD and I have to, get 4 or 5 pills for it, which helped. It's actually a defense mechanism so you don't get attacked. You're always.
I'm changing the subject, Donald. Do I need to call you Your Grace since you're there in your purple clerics?
Call me what?
Call you Your Grace since you're there in your purple clerics?
Just call me Brother Don. I told, some of the people commenting on the YouTubes will call me Reverend Don or Reverend Veitch. I told a few of them, don't give me the Reverend stuff, just call me Don. And I tell Ryan Underwood, don't call me Father Veitch, just call me Elder Veitch or older brother. So he calls me Brother Don and I call him Brother Ryan. None of this father stuff. I don't know where all that came from. Anyways.
Well, Peter says the father thing creeps in during the Tractarians.
We're talking about corruption broadly, and Aaron is now a bishop in the Evangelical and Reformed Synod. Synod. And he's doing some work with German Reformed, the RCUS, the Russian Reformed, I think he calls them, and then others from the UCC that are seeking a safe harbor from the liberalism. So for context on the viewers, do you go by bishop now, or are you just going to be Reverend Long?
Well, in all honesty, to most people, I'm just Aaron. I prefer the term, if somebody is going to slap a title on me, I take Reverend before I take anything, because all Reverend means is I got a master's of divinity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've discovered in certain circles that's different, but since I have my MDiv, I can deal with Reverend. I ain't father, I ain't bishop, I ain't none of that. All my bishop mess is an office that we took some sand out of the Anglican sandbox, and some of them are mad about it.
Yeah, I heard Bishop Peter Robinson took some heat for last Saturday, and for others. We had the consecration of Aaron to the bishopric by Bishop Peter Robinson, and apparently there was a big backlash from some of the Anglo-Catholics. I'm going to have Peter on next Thursday, and I'm praying for his wife Denise every day at morning prayer.
Well, between what he's going through with his wife and that church building, it's like I told you the other day. They got that building, and it's a beautiful sanctuary. It's a beautiful building, but it's old. So they're having roof and air conditioning problems at the same time.
Yep. Plus, he's a busy pastor, which, like for you might get an emergency call for somebody to get over to the hospital or a funeral that they pop up on you, and you can't control that schedule. If you, Paul, I keep calling you Paul, boom. Because that's Paul's Chapel. That's been there since 1947.
Yep, and it's actually not named after St. Paul. It's named after Lindsay Paul Leonard, who died on the beaches in Italy during World War II. And his daddy, the Reverend Dr. Odell Leonard, and his mama took the money they got for him. Instead of keeping it for themselves, they gave it down here and started a parish here.
Yeah.
So we named the church after him.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move forward on our subject. You said you had 3 or 4 sessions, and maybe we can meet weekly to develop those.
Well, I want to start out with my background a little bit
Okay.
because it's going to explain how I got to where I am with this.
Okay.
I am the 7th Reverend Long to come out of Bethany Reformed Church.
Let me do screen share so I can type up the notes. Are you okay with that?
It don't bother me in the least.
You and I will go up over onto the right, and because I want to memorialize this, and so we don't forget anything. Where is it at? I think it's this one. Let me try it. Can you see that?
Yep, says pinch out for a bigger view. I see it.
Yeah, and this thing, watch,
Yeah.
that stands for Women of the Church. And it's a hyper-feminist group connected with the Church of England. And they are hyper-feminists and LGBTQers.
They're a bunch of satanic witches.
It sounds would be watch, like, you know, a watch on an arm.
Right.
Well, Reverend Murphy called them witches. And
he's stealing my terms.
You ain't gonna. And by the way, Aaron, Bishop Fenwick watches these things, and I'm told he rages, but he's gone underground and he's in his little cottage house, small house. I've seen it on google.com. 4 ministers are going to pull out, I'm told, and the entire northern diocese is going to collapse. Anyways, I put these in here. I got those last night, and I need to study it a bit more. But he was faulted for calling them witches, one of the charges. But let me go here. I'm going to put it in red, which means for me discussion. So you got the floor. I'll just call you Al.
Works for me.
Okay. You got the floor.
Well, I want to give you some of my background to explain how I got to where I was. I come from a family on both my mama's side and my daddy's side that even before we came over to America in the 1750s, we was all preachers in the German Reformed tradition over there. But I'm the 7th Reverend Long to come out of Bethany Reformed Church up here. And my first Snyder ancestor was a member of George Washington's Black Robe Brigade when he was serving Pilgrim Reform down here in Lexington back during the Revolutionary War.
Whoa, stop. You're the 7th generation of German Reformed clergy.
Well, I'm the 7th one that came out of it. We got 14 generations underground. Well, 14 if you count my daddy. He ain't underground yet, but you know what I'm saying. We've been down here. I can take you out to Bethany one time when you're out here and show you the Johannes Long Memorial out there. Or I can take you out to Beulah and show you the Kuntzes, or I can take you over to Pilgrim and show you the Snyders. I can do Beckerdites and Liven Goods and Cravers and the whole rest of the lot. Davidson County family tree is real broad, but it ain't real deep.
Okay, I got you. And you were raised strictly on the Heidelberg Catechism, is that right?
Heidelberg Catechism, Mercersburg liturgy every Sunday.
Wait a minute, raised. I'm going to spell Heidelberger out because there will be some Anglicans watching this. And so you've got that in your DNA.
Oh, absolutely. No, we had to. I did a 3-year confirmation course where Reverend Bank Shepherd started us off 3 years worth of confirmation classes. We had to know the Heidelberg, we had to memorize it. We had to know Luther Small, and he even made us learn chunks of the Baltimore to know what we were arguing against.
So he was doing his homework with you guys.
Well, that's the way we did it. Confirmation was probably the most important part of your life because that's when you became an adult.
You're talking about the Romanist confession there.
Yeah, but he wanted us to know what we were going to argue against. By the time we were not allowed to be confirmed until we could have proved that we had the Heidelberg pretty much memorized and we had read through the Bible cover to cover. And we were tested by the elders. What I laugh about is a lot of the clergy I know that have come through the main line. I knew more by the time I was 14 about the Christian faith than they knew graduating seminary.
That's kind of like me. You know, I got my start around age 18. Dad handed me Berkhoff, and then he handed me Hodge, and he handed me Louis Gossen's work, several works. He said, read 10 pages a day, 10 chapters of the Old Testament a day, 10 chapters of the New Testament a day, all of that as an aside from my undergraduate work in chemical engineering, which I expanded out to get a double major in chemical engineering and philosophy. And the philosophy grew. I did my thesis on Augustine's views of predestination, grace, free will, and so forth. And my Calvinism is rooted in my Westminster tradition, but it was undergirded by that philosophy thesis that I did, an undergraduate honors thesis. So, and that came up today talking with Roger DeBerry, that when he went before a panel of 6 FCE clergymen,
Yeah.
the first question out of Gradison's mouth, he's a barrister / FCE presbyter, was, "Are you a Calvinist?" And Roger said, "To the marrow." And it went downhill from there. And the thought occurred to me, and it has occurred to me in the years before this, what is the problem with the anti-Calvinists? You got a thought?
Donald, there's an easy answer to that. And it's something that you're going to see in a funny way in academic circles. People have problems with Calvinists, with radical traditional Roman Catholics, and with radical Lutheran confessions, all three. And the reason is...
So you said radical or traditional?
Yes, rad-trad cats. Radical traditional Catholics.
Rad, trad,
cats.
Cat.
But
like
I
this?
say RADTRADCAT, rad, trad, cat. It's just easier than saying the whole mouthful. But the problem is those in authority have problems with all three groups. And they do, because I want you to think about this. We are Calvinists. We are militantly reformed, which means we are well versed in Augustine. Your rad trad cats, they are well versed in Thomas Aquinas. They know their Aquinas inside and out. Now, we may not agree with them theologically. We may not agree with them philosophically. But the thing is you got to give them credit that they can think. They are taught to think. And the last thing any of the leadership wants is thinking laity and clergy. Because the moment the clergy and the laity think, they can start to observe the corruption and the problems around them. It's why you are salt in the wounds, Donald, is because you can see what the problems are. You have the tools to be able to process it. And you're not just in there for some milk-salt, romantic, happy, clappy sing-along. You want solid theology, you want solid philosophy, and you want manly clergy. You don't want no fancy pants, dressed up, effeminate little mincing gay boy up there doing his little dance and his song and talking a bunch of soft-hearted mess and making everybody get the warm fuzzies. You want somebody that's going to preach hell is hot and Jesus is the only way to heaven, and you want them to be able to give it to you in a logical way.
Yeah, my psychiatrist says I have OCD, which means I like to have my things in order, my folded clothes here, my books over here, everything kind of in its right place. Now, when I come in contact with a sociopath, which I think Fenwick and Shifty Sutton are, I am, the psychiatrist says, the natural enemy to those kind of men because they shift around. They say, they say this, they say that, and we catch them at it, and they don't like being held accountable.
But Don, it comes down to this. It's why I said the problem is bigger than just Sutton and Fenwick, even though they are prime examples. The thing is the way the church has developed, say, since the late 1800s. Now, Peter says it starts with the Council of Trent, and then it grows into some versions of Reformed scholasticism, and then it goes to the Latitudinarians in the Anglican Church. But I ain't going to get into all that. I'm going to say the late 1800s. Since the late 1800s, what we have seen is sociopaths climbing to the highest offices in all of these denominations. And what they do is they create bureaucracies underneath them of clergy who don't actually go out in the trenches and serve the churches, but sit around and fawn over them. It's like Peter is fond of saying, the bishops ain't going to come directly against you. What they do is they train attack dogs to come against you. And they use these attack dogs because what they want are people to sit around and tell them how great they are and how right they are. And that goes into that sociopathy you're talking about. And what they have done is they have turned the church from a mighty army of God, onward Christian soldiers, stand up for Jesus. They have turned the church from that into little social clubs where certain people are just existing to maintain the organization, to basically allow them to have their egos fed.
Well, that is exactly what Roger DeBerry was saying this morning, that they infiltrate, they stay quiet, they start moving people who are their favorites into positions, and they climb. And then in time, they do a takeover, and anybody who holds to the basics, like in the FCE, we were talking about Arthur Bentley Taylor and Barry Shucksmith, who hold on to the traditional foundational documents, they start to go after them. And that's what Fenwick did. I'm going to put this Fenwick's takeover. To make that a little bit bigger.
But I mean, that's exactly what it is, Donald. Look at what happened to the E&R church. The E&R church used to be completely militantly confessional even after the E's and the R's merged. We held to the Augsburg Variata. Now, you understand Variata.
Yes.
Calvin signed off on the Variata. We held to the Heidelberg Catechism, Luther Small, and the Evangelical Catechism.
I'm having a blank here.
Augsburg.
Yeah, there you go.
Augsburg Variata. We were solidly confessional. And in 1956, at the North Carolina Classis meeting at Second Reformed Church, Reverend Dr. Odell, if we ever had a saint, was one. He walked down on the floor, and I think you heard me tell this story on Saturday. Odell got down there on the floor,
What's his name?
Reverend Dr. Odell Leonard.
Reverend Dr. Odell, like that?
Yep. Odell, Odell.
Okay.
He took the floor when they were talking about merging into the United Church of Christ, because we had to vote in classes by classes. And he said, whole room went silent. I've read the minutes. I talked to men that was there.
Okay, talking about the merger with who?
Congregational Christians.
Okay.
He said, boys, y'all do this, and one day y'all's chickens is going to come home to roost.
Yeah, I remember you telling.
And I'm going to tell you what, he was a prophet if there was one. Because when them congregational Christians got a hold of everything, first thing they did was knock our confessional statements out. And they knocked them out of the seminaries, and they knocked them out of the classes, and they stopped requiring subscription. Because, see, we used to require a level of strict subscription. And so that's the first thing that these sociopaths are going to do. They know they can't take out the confessions right off the bat. So what they're going to do is they're going to get rid of strict subscription. Oh, you can take a exception here, you can take an exception there. You know what happens when you start taking exceptions? You end up giving away the farm in the long run.
Well, funny you should mention that, because that is exactly what happened with the FCE. They started going very soft on the foundational document.
Yep.
And Bishop Powell said he was angling for a rapprochement with the Church of England. This was quite early, in fact, and had a discussion with Roger Dubarry saying, the only thing we need to agree on with the Church of England is the Trinity. We can get rid of or diminish our other foundational documents, and Roger Dubarry said it was like he was a romanticist and he had stardust in his eyes. And that became a big thing. Kind of the ecumenical movement moved in. But in order to have that, you had to diminish your home doctrinal statements, which is what you're saying here with the UCC. You guys were evangelical reformed, right?
Evangelical and reformed. We were a merger of, in 1934, what was the Prussian Evangelical Union Church merged with the RCUS, Reformed Church in the Reformed Church in the United States, to form the Evangelical and Reformed Church.
And getting rid of foundational documents, that's exactly what Sutton played to as well.
Bingo, because they all do.
And one question I have for Peter Robinson, which I want to confirm or deny with him, because he is an old FCE man.
That's where he was first presbyterated or ordained. Yep. Or whatever.
Yep. And allegedly, one report says that he had a chat with Shifty. And asked Shifty, that's Sutton, that's my Marine nickname for him. I'm trying to be polite here. You and I are kind of like rough rednecks, so to speak.
Well, in the end of the day, Donald, you don't want to know what I call the man. Because I don't trust anybody that starts off as a Baptist, ends up Presbyterian, and then is Anglican, and goes on his journey. And the only thing that don't change is he wants to have a bigger hat and he wants a bigger office.
Yep. Yep. He allegedly subscribed to the Westminster Confession until he didn't.
Right.
You know, how you do that? Well, he just didn't have the background in it. Anyways, Peter had a discussion with Sutton, about the FCE Declaration of Principles, a foundational document. And allegedly Sutton told Peter that all those things, those are minor details. The thing that really matters is the episcopal office. So I'm going to ask Peter if I heard that right, and can he clarify if it's right or wrong?
I know the story, but I'm gonna let Peter talk about that.
Am I on the right trail?
You're right. You're hunting the right coon right there. Yeah.
Okay.
But
So
that's Peter's conversation. That ain't mine.
I got you. I got you. And do you think he will confirm that?
Well, now you need to remember, Donald, me and you ain't nothing but old rednecks from the background. Peter is very formally English. And Peter has a tendency to say the same things we say. He just says them in a manner that sounds a little bit less offensive, if that makes any sense.
All my British friends. I'm told that up north in Lancashire and all up around that area, they're a little bit rougher. And people from Australia and South Africa, like Church of England and South Africa, CESA, they tend to be a little bit rougher and ruffle English sense of courtesy. But as Roger DeBerry pointed out, that can be dangerous because it leads people to not confront error. That came up this morning.
Well, I grew up in a tradition, Donald, that's exactly the opposite of Anglicans. If we had a fight, we had the fight on the floor. And we'd have some knockdown slobber knockers where it may be people going outside and settling stuff off the floor. But we took care of it where it needed to be taken care of. And once it was done, it was done. It's like this whole thing about the Mercersburg thing. There was this whole blow up about all that. And that wasn't, Mercersburg wasn't why North Carolina left, and neither was slavery. It's because them damn Yankees wouldn't send us preachers and wouldn't let us start our own seminary. But all that aside, once everything was settled out, they ended up coming to the conclusion if you wanted to be a high church Mercersburger, you could. If you wanted to be a low church or Sinus, you could. As long as you signed off on the Heidelberg Catechism and you believed it and you preached the Bible and you did what you're supposed to do, we ain't going to be swinging incense, and we ain't going to have no bread boxes in the sanctuary. And we ain't going to have no chasubles because we ain't papists. As long as you hold to the rules, you can be in the church and we know who you are.
What did you say? No Christ boxes, or what did you call
No
them?
bread box. We don't need no bread boxes in the church.
Well,
you want to have a bread box, have it in your kitchen at home.
I
ain't worshiping no loaf of bread.
Well, we know where Shifty Sutton went on that in the REC. We know where Fenwick went on that. Fenwick disappears into the term mystery. He in his writing, he said, the Romanists can't be sure of transubstantiation, and the Reformed can't be sure that it doesn't happen. It's all a mystery. And what he did with that self-appointed dictum, obiter dicta, was to contradict one of the principles of the FCE and REC, which said Christ is not present in the elements, in the bread, in the wine, on the table.
Well, you can just take the FEC, REC stuff out of it. He's denying the 39 articles. Basically, he's lying when he claims he's Anglican, because anybody that denies 39 articles is lying when they say they Anglican.
Yeah.
39 articles, 1662 in the Book of Homilies defines what Anglicanism is. If you put a bread box in your church, you ain't nothing but a liar when you put Anglo anything on. Because 39 article says you can't have no bread box in your church. It says that the wafer shall not be lifted up or worshiped or paraded around. Fact is, if I'm reading the 39 articles right, they'd prefer to have leavened bread in there. That's what we used was leavened bread.
Yeah, I think this goes all back to what you're saying here. Knock out those confessional documents, keep it out of the seminaries. And speaking of anti-Calvinism, Sutton told a senior professor in the RES in Philadelphia, Reformed Episcopal Seminary, to not teach Calvinism. Do not teach the 5 points. Do not teach the Synod of Dort. Now, the senior professor said, sorry, that's what I'm going to keep teaching. And Reformed Episcopal Seminary has held to that for 100 years at least. But Shifty, you know, Shifty is Shifty. He was making room for the Anglo-Catholics, which he is.
Well, and that's the funny thing about Anglo-Catholicism. And it's why I was talking to Peter about this the other day. It's why I have more respect for your rad trad cats, your radical traditional Catholics. Their confession, it's not just them liking to play dress up. They'll whip out the Catechism of the Council of Trent. They'll quote it. They'll whip out the canons of Trent. Me and you don't agree with them, but guess what?
Yeah,
they have a confession.
Yeah.
It ain't just playing dress up and dancing around like a bunch of queer boys in a sanctuary. They actually have something they believe. Anglo-Catholics just want to play dress up. Sorry, I get fired up about that.
Yeah, let me just inform my British listeners that this is Aaron Long. This is Western North Carolina. You'll hear the accent twang. You're talking to a man who was bred in a viper pit and survived. He's tough, he's militant, and I join with him. How long have I known you, Aaron?
Donald, I've known you at least for, I'd say 8-9 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You've known Peter for 20-some. Peter was telling me he first met you on some sort of email list when you were still on board the boat.
Yeah. I remember there was a Yahoo chat list in which Sutton was there and Dr. Daniel Dunlap, and they were arguing against the imputed righteousness of Christ, and away from gratia imputata, imputed righteousness. And anyways, that's a long story. Sutton was there for that. He was a federal visionist, and he was in transition at that point. And by 2000, he held to some version of transubstantiation. Call it by another name, trans-elementation or whatever. Christ's body and blood is everywhere on a million tables, and millions of gallons of Christ's blood are in chalices.
Calvin teaches spiritual presence. Bullinger teaches spiritual presence. Bootser, Turretin, much smarter men than you and me taught spiritual presence and argued it.
So
I'd argue Augustine taught
it. Yeah. You have respect for these ACs because they stick to their guns.
Oh, I ain't got respect for the ACs. I got respect for the rad trads.
Oh.
The ones that are the SPXX. I have respect for them. When the Pope told them they had to go to that clown liturgy mess, they went with that Paul VI liberal witchcraft BS mess they're doing. They said, Lefebvre, I can't even pronounce that French name, Lefebvre and all them. They told the Pope where he could stick it. And they stayed Roman Catholic. They held to their confessions. And yes, I got respect for them. Do I think they're a bunch of papist devils? Yes, but they're papist devils I got respect for.
Well, Thomas Cranmer would agree with you in calling them Antichrist.
Oh, they're right. And what I think is funny is right now, that's one thing we can agree with them on is that old Francis is Antichrist. Frankenstein is what I like to call him. All paths lead to heaven, Frankenstein, that devil they got in the Vatican City right now. Somebody should just knock the snot out of him and get him out of there. Because he
There's a
ain't doing good for nobody.
there's a fellow in Rome teaching at some school, Jules Gnomes. And I've asked if he would be willing to do a 30-45 minute interview. I think he's some kind of evangelical of some sort. But I'd like to get his take on things because the last time I went to St. Peter's in Rome, and I had been there many times, been to the Vatican Library, blah, 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 when I was in the Navy. But the last time I went, I walked in the front doors about 10, 15, 20 feet and did an immediate 180 and walked out. I couldn't go in. There are literal demons. I'm not kidding you, in that
Oh, I
city
believe you.
and also in Naples. I don't know how many, but it is evil.
Malachi Martin wrote about all that years ago.
Malachi Martin, that rings a bell.
Malachi Martin was a Jesuit, and he was possibly one of the finest Semitic language scholars in the world at the time Vatican II started. And he was there. You'll hear about him. They call him a crackpot. But the thing is they say he was there when he sort of claims he was there when they read when John the 23rd read the third secret of Fatima and all the rest of it and said it's not for this time. At the end of the Vatican II, Malachi Martin got asked to be released from his Jesuit vows and left out. He's the one that writes the book that condemns the Jesuits. He's the one that writes Windswept House to talk about how he basically saw the whole Vatican get possessed by the devil after Vatican II. He wrote Hostage to the Devil, which actually, even though it's a papist book, is one of the more interesting demonology texts I've ever read. He's more honest with the subject than anybody I've ever seen. He ain't like them tambourine shaking Pentecostals. And they handle snakes and throw snakes on people and speak some babbling mess and think they got the devil out. But I can go into that some other point in time.
You are an entertaining character, Aaron.
Well, you ever been to one of them snake handling churches?
No.
When I was in college, I went to one up there in the mountains. Snakes don't bother me. We used to mess around with water moccasins and all that when I was a youngin' out in the creek. But I'll pick up a snake. I carry off black snakes because my mama alone would get up and whoop my tail if she ever saw me kill one. I'll kill a racer all day long. But it wasn't the snakes that bothered me. It was watching them up there drinking that arsenic that sort of threw me off.
Yes. Anyways.
Anyway, no, what my thing is, my proposition in all of this is ultimately, Donald, what you were seeing with Fenwick, what you were seeing with Sutton, we're starting to see in the PCA. We're starting to see in the OPC. It's what I faced whenever I got elected by the Eastern District of the UECNA to be Peter's suffragan over, I got a unanimous vote, by the way, from the Eastern District. I was elected to be the suffragan over the ENR churches because the Anglicans were worried we were going to corrupt their lily white liturgy with our Mercersburg stuff. And we were going to corrupt the whole thing with our rather brash and loud perspective on things.
So what, are you still UECNA?
No, I had to turn in my letter of resignation before I got consecrated. Otherwise, I would be charged with schism because a certain bishop who will not be named at this point in time in honor of a request I received from a man I respect, who is.
I guess that it's that Dr. Merle, but you don't need to confirm or deny.
I was told that I did not have the personality or temperament to be a bishop. I was too much of a barbarian and too crass. Evidently, I didn't know the difference between a salad fork. Evidently, did you know that in Anglican circles, you can't be a bishop unless you know the difference between a salad fork and a fish fork? I don't even know what a darn fish fork is. But the fact that we'd have convocation meetings and I'd shut them heathens up when they got to running their mouths and tell them we're going to take a vote. We're going to do this the right way. And I ain't going to sit here and listen to you pontificate about a subject you don't know your butt from a hole in the ground about.
I think what we need to do is send you over to England to go around to those FCE churches and straighten them up.
Well, it ain't hard. It's my problem with all this. Whole shooting match. It was my problem with the UCC. It's the problem I've seen in the Methodists. I'm seeing it in the Presbyterians. I'm seeing it everywhere I turn.
Going
Is the
faster than I can type here. You, United Methodist Church, PC, USA.
well, I'm seeing it in the PCA and the OPC right now too. I've been dealing with some of that stuff that I can't go into right now because I've told them I keep my mouth shut about it. But I'll say I'm seeing the same sort of level. The PCA, I'll straight out tell you, you know what the problem with the PCA is? They didn't set them witches that started that revoice mess on fire and kicked the butts out of the church the moment they said it. It's like with the OPC. When Spangler called out that Satan worshiping witch Amy Bird back in 2020, and them darn liberal white knights sat there and got Spangler kicked out because he was calling the devil a devil when he saw it.
You're going too fast for.
Oh, I'm sorry, Donald.
No, that's okay. The Rejoice Conference.
Revoice.
Revoice. Yes, let me.
That's when the PCA wanted to include the queers.
You know, Brett Murphy is going to listen to this, and he's going to be howling and laughing because he's Australian, and he's different in tone and tenor than you, but he will laugh at your directness, and he's of the same cut of cloth as you are. So didn't they that the Revoice conference was to make room for
the queers? We don't need no steers and the queers in the church. We don't need a bunch of eunuchs that ain't got the testicular fortitude to fight. And we don't need a bunch of flouncing little fudge packers trying to dress up our churches. We need an army. We are fighting the devil, and if we don't take it to him, it's like Reverend Dr. Odell said when he got the bricks for this church. Every brick in this church came from a busted liquor still. And he said in the pulpit one Sunday, every brick that got laid on this building was like giving the devil a black eye, because we were taking what was meant to be used for evil and using it for good.
My British friends, welcome to Bishop Long of Western North Carolina, who's a straight shooter. And I think that's why we probably get along, you and me, because I'm former military, I'm militant, can get a little uncouth and rough, and I'm trying for me, to smooth that out. But you and I, we're warriors. We're not over in the medical unit helping the injured. We're not over in logistics. We're right out there on the front line, tossing grenades and locking and loading.
United Church of Christ tried to kick me out of seminary 3 times and kept me standing for 5 hours during my ordination interview. And if I didn't let them SOBs drum me out, I certainly ain't going to let these soft girl boys do it to me.
Yeah, you were taught, they call it adversative training. You were taught by fighting.
I got told you said you're OCD. They told me I had, what was it, obsessive defiance disorder when they made me take that $600 brain test. I told them if you wasn't worshiping the devil, I wouldn't be defined.
What is it? Obsessive?
Or something about obstructive defiance disorder. I don't know. I don't pay any attention to that mess. Something defiance disorder. But it's because I wouldn't roll over when they were wanting to tell me it's all right to have these satanic witches, women ordained, and it's all right for us to have an Earth Day celebration, and it's all right for us to change the words in the Lord's Prayer to Our Mother, Father, who art in heaven. And I said, in the old days, we'd have taken you out back and horsewhipped you and drove you out of the church, because the elders had the good common sense when I called a spiritual council meeting to excommunicate you butts the first time you started talking that bull mess.
Aaron, didn't I help to get you your degree? They wouldn't
even give me the diploma.
the
No.
diploma. And then I think I entered in, if I'm not mistaken, and
Oh, it was
wrote,
my transcripts. I got my diploma. It was my transcripts. They wouldn't let them go.
it was something along those lines. And I wrote the Lancaster people telling them that I was going to report them to the Association of Theological Schools for an investigation. And then all of a sudden they coughed up a transcript for you. Do I have that right?
You have that right.
Yeah. So I was able to help you get your transcript.
Oh, they wouldn't let me serve in Reformed churches when I was in seminary because we had to be in a church all 3 years. I had to go and work in Lutheran churches because they wouldn't let me in the Reformed churches, trying to trip me up that way.
So you, and for the British listeners, this man, Bishop Long, has learned through 20 years,
21 now. I'm getting
21
old, Donald.
of combat, of conflict, of chaos wrought by those who hate and have dismissed their foundational confessional documents. Now, going back up there, I asked the question about why the anti-Calvinism right here. Maybe I'll make that a little bit bigger too. And you said, well, that's real simple, Donald. They've just done away with their confessions.
Well, they don't want people to think. They want people that'll kiss their butt.
I'm going to add that.
A Calvinist who is an honest Calvinist is trained to think, is trained in critical reasoning.
Yeah. I'm telling
It's
you.
not just that Donald, if you were dumb and would just follow along, they could accept predestination and all that. It's not what you believe, it's the tools you gather. It's why with the Anglo-Catholics, they'll teach Hall, but they won't just teach them Summa. Why would you teach Hall instead of Summa? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Teach Hall rather than who?
Then just teach the Summa Theologian. Why would you teach an inferior version of Thomism through Hall? You do know who I'm talking about when I say Hall?
Bishop Hall?
I can't remember who it was. He taught up at Union Seminary in New York during the late 1800s. He is the theologian all the Anglo-Catholics go back to in America. I've got his 2 volumes of Anglican Dogmatics. All it is a dumbed down regurgitation of Thomas Aquinas' Summa. But it's an inferior document. They don't want you to be able to think. They don't care what you believe. What they want you to do is to be.
Did you say Union Seminary?
I think that was the one it was. Peter can answer that question. He knows exactly where it is.
So it's a dumbed down version of Thomas Aquinas?
Yeah. Hall's Dogmatics. Hall.
This is new info to me. Of course, I wasn't reared in that tradition. I was taught to think by Westminsterians.
Well, see, I read broadly. I've been going through Musculus lately. Musculus did a Commonplaces, and he was one of the Flacians that drove the German reforms and the Lutherans apart on that side. But I've never actually read Musculus. I just got done with Chemnitz, and I'm getting ready to start going through some of Bootzer's works. And I'm probably going to end up starting to teach through Decades again. I haven't done that in a while.
Decades used to be required of Anglican clergy.
Well, my 3 favorite systematics are Calvin's 1541 Institutes. Banner of Truth still sells that. Bullinger's Decades, and Ursinus's Commentary. And I actually do like Melanchthon's Later Loci.
I'm not a big Melanchthon fan at all.
I
But
don't
that's another
expect you to
story.
be. I also like Abrakel, Christian's Reasonable Service.
Yeah.
And Watson. I like Watson.
So there's something deeper than this anti-Calvinism. It
It's
just,
not, it is not the theology they have a problem with. It is the ability to think that they have a problem with.
I
They
think,
don't want thinking Christians, they want mindless followers.
I think
They,
it's deeper than that.
what do you think it is, Donald?
I think it's unmortified pride, wanting
Well,
to
I think it goes hand in hand.
wanting to go to be able to control God. You make the decisions on what God can or can't do. You give him the green light. We can control God in the sacraments. I throw the water on ipso facto. There's ontological regeneration. We control that. We can control the clergy with our holy magic hands of tactile succession.
Which is why they're upset about my consecration, because it's done escape.
Yeah, they can control God in giving him a command to jump out of the right hand of the Father down onto earth and landing in some bread and wine. It's all about pride. Now, I've thought about this many times over the years, and believe it or not, I am a slow thinker. It takes me a while to come to conclusions, but when I do, they stick. That's why I'm still a Westminster man. I've not changed. I use the Westminster standards in my ordination exam with Bishop Leonard Riches, Dr. Milton Fisher, and Reverend Neil Beck. And they closed it down. It's supposed to be several hours. We got a couple hours into it. We took a break, and the bishop came in and said, "We don't think we need to do the rest of the exam. This is the finest exam we've ever heard." Anyways, yeah, thinking, uh, repeating, memorizing, reflecting, and then coming to conclusions. So I think it's I'll put it here.
They don't want people getting think for themselves, Donald.
So that's a control mechanism too.
Right. That's exactly what it is. I'm not arguing with you. We agree on this principle. I'm just looking at it from the bottom to the top, and you're looking at it from the top to the bottom. They want mewling little pansy boys that they can tell what to do. They want, as I've heard Peter say, they want attack chihuahuas. Dogs with a whole, as my wife says
I'm not
about
sure how to spell chihuahuas, but
well,
whatever.
I'll give you what my wife says. We got a boxer that she says has got an alligator mouth and a hummingbird butt.
What is it?
Alligator mouth and hummingbird butt.
Alligator mouth and humming.
Bird butt.
How does your wife respond to Anglo-Catholics if she does? It probably out of her wheelhouse. She just doesn't understand them, I guess.
Right now, Joanna's just obsessed with canning fruit butter. She's made the whole house is filled up because we're getting ready to have a bazaar with our chicken barbecue. So there's 82 cans of fig butter, 82 jars of fig butter. I don't know how many jars of peaches and strawberries and blueberries. And heaven forbid the apples come in. I'm gonna be up in Cana, Virginia buying darn apples. And she's making what she calls granny squares. She's taught herself how to crochet. So my house is full of a bunch of craft crap.
She serves in the battalion. She serves over in the logistics section, not the medical unit, not the front lines, but and you need logistics, not an intel. We have intel units in every battalion and on every ship. Uh, So she's in the logistics department. Okay. And that's important because I've been talking with some of these friends and talking to Bishop Rossello, and he's not on the front lines for his own reasons. whereas I am, like you, hitting the beaches of Normandy. Well, listen, we've gone over an hour and I don't
Oh,
like,
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to keep you so long, Donald.
oh, oh, can we do this again next week, same time, same station?
Absolutely.
That is, if you don't have, the
If
kind,
something comes up, I'll message you.
yeah, okay. All
And
right.
I do apologize to all you English folks if I come across as a little ugly.
Yeah, yeah, okay. They'll chuckle like I do, so don't worry about it. So next week, same time, same station on this issue.
Oh, and I do want to make the statement, Donald, I am not pro-Roman, traditional Roman Catholicism.
Yeah, I
I
know.
want to clarify that. I have respect for the ones that hold to their confession and don't sit there and bend over when they tell them in Rome to bend over.
Yeah, I'm of the same mind, like the G3 Anglo-Catholics.
Mhm.
They're consistent with who they are.
Right.
And that's where I have a problem with Sutton. Why is he staying corrupt the REC when he could have joined the G3 group?
Because he wasn't going to knock off Chandler and Haverland.
Yeah, Haverman would stay. Chandler, I met him. I'm going to interview him here next month. A cordial clarification meeting, not to be hostile, but to learn about the APA and let him do the speaking. I was at his confirmation a service here in this area near Norfolk. He did a mass, but it had some confirmation business in there as well. Couldn't have been more cordial. And I went in my purple shirt. I would have done that for your consecration, but Joe Baylor brought a black gown for me, and I didn't think the purple shirt would go with the black gown, but whatever. I kind of do it as a joke in one sense, in another sense, I don't. I'm a two-order man, I'm a presbyter.
Well, Donald, you get together some churches, we can go ahead and consecrate you and you can be a high potentate bishop.
I can be a what?
High potentate bishop. You can get you some churches together and you can have you a Westminster Synod.
Westminster Anglicans. How's that? I'm a Westminster man.
That's right, Donald. I don't think it's a bad idea. That's ultimately one of the goals we're working toward.
Well, I posted that goofy, jokey post in Low Church Anglicans because I knew that had been percolating a little bit, and it was a joke on a joke. But then there was a more serious element that maybe there are some Westminster men who want to use, I would say, the REC prayer book,
right?
Some other Reformed confessions. Well, who knows? We can sure pray about it. There's no need. That is, resurrect these old glorious confessions. Can you imagine Fenwick hearing that? Oh boy.
Well,
By the way,
somebody needs to take him out behind the woodshed and just beat the tar out of him until life makes sense.
Okay, brother, let's close in prayer.
All right, pray for us, Donald.
I shall do it from the collect of the 1662 prayer book. O Almighty God, King of kings and governor of all things, whose power no creature can resist, to whom it belongeth to punish sinners and to be merciful to those who repent. Save and deliver us, we beseech thee, from the hands of our enemies. Abate their pride, assuage their malice, and confound their manifold devices and desires, that we, being armed with thy sovereign word and thy sovereign spirit, may be preserved evermore from all perils. Enable us, O sovereign God, to rise up, to cross the English Channel, and to hit the Normandy beaches, and to go on from the Normandy beaches to Berlin, and to give us victory. Cleanse the church, we beseech thee, through the merits of thy only Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, brother.
All right, I got to get my visitations done.
Okay. We'll talk to you later.
All right, we'll talk with you later, Donald.
Bye-bye.
Bye.